so much for joining us today for the second edition of Design Is. We put together this talk series in order to create a time and a space for a dialogue around the role of design in creating a future that we all want to be a part of. So we hope that you will find the speakers and the talks inspiring and help you develop your own understanding of what it means to be human and what it means to design for humans. We are very excited to have Gretchen Anderson today for Design Is Human. She is the Director of Design for Digital Catalyst. She leads user-centered design and design thinking at PG&E. And when she joined PG&E in 2016, she brought a wealth of experience in digital design of products and services. Prior to that, she led the design of hardware and software for next-generational surgical systems. And we are very, very excited to have her here today. So join me in welcoming Gretchen.
Hello, hello. So lovely to be here. Thank you, Kai. When Kai asked me to come talk to Google designers largely about being human, I had a little pause about, I'm not sure what I'm going to tell you. I'm not sure if I can help you be better humans yourselves. But I think, I think there are some things that we can come around as designers who design for humans, but also whose practice involves being kind of, as I've said here, kind of human at the core. So I am now at PG&E, which is our public utility. Believe it or not, we're doing design. We're leading product development with design there, which is pretty exciting to know that it's reached into, government and utilities. Design has kind of arrived. And what that means to me is that all of the work that I've done as a consultant and, I've designed surgical robotic systems, I've done genetic sequencing. I love wicked problems, but that's all because at the end of the day, it's something for people. I'm not the person that's going to design Netflix. It's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. I love to watch it, don't get me wrong. But, I'm really focused on sort of how are we going to change the world of humans with what we do. And I hope you believe that we can. So just to frame up what I want to talk about, I'm not going to talk too much about user-centered design. I'm going to assume that we all kind of get that. I have a few things to mention. But, if I think about it, I have this cycle of things that I deal with as a designer. I'm at the core of it, and I have a team that I work with, and I have stakeholders that I serve, and then I have users that I serve. And so I'm going to kind of use this as a frame for some of what I talk about today. And just to get started, I want to show you guys a video. Have you guys heard about the teacher that has a custom handshake for every student? Some of you have seen this. See if I can get this to play. For those of you who haven't, this is a teacher in North Carolina who he's got, like every public school teacher, 30 some odd students. And if you watch this, he has one for every single one of them. This one's my favorite, including the ones I'm not doing that. Some of them are more elaborate than others. And sometimes when I show this to people, they think, wow, that's a lot of work. He's got to remember all of those handshakes. I've even had people ask me, is this distracting from his being a teacher? Very expressive, very personal. Very theatrical. So awesome. You don't need to watch that ABC. The reason I love this video, and I talk about this as putting humans at the center of design, is what this says to me is kind of at the core of what we as human-centered designers do, which is I care enough about you to make something for you and with you. I really believe in that. And it's a lot of work, and I got to remember a bunch of stuff, and I got to run some workshops, and I got to make some Post-its. But it's because at the end of the day, I think I get to a better result. And I guarantee you, those students are having a better educational experience because they feel valued, they feel listened to, they feel respected, they're included. And all of that makes for a better experience. So as you run into people who maybe start to go like, yeah, I talked to some users. I'm user-centered. A lot of product managers like to do that, right? Remind them of like, it's about the love of co-creation, really, not just sort of like, I talked to 10 people, check the box. So that's the end of my user-centered design spiel. I think you guys have the rest of that. So now I want to talk a little bit about stakeholders. When I talk to people in the design space who are trying to struggle with, I'm new to being at a big company. PG&E is 27,000 some odd people. I have not been in that big environment, and I struggled a little bit with like, how am I going to scale myself? How am I going to be who I am normally in small environments when I get into these bigger places? But what I think I've found is there's some principles that are the same. And some of it has to do with the way we think about stakeholders. So the first thing that I always think of for myself and for others is this idea of they versus us. And I'll talk more about this, but as Greg Petroff once said, designers can be a paranoid bunch. I don't know if any of you resemble that remark, but there can be a lot of like, they don't listen to me, they don't understand me. And what I would try to say to people is like, who's the they? Right? We're all doing this together. We are all doing this for and with each other. And so who's the they? So if you can rewire your thinking to being on the same side and being aligned, that's a super big win. And the flip side of that is somebody that just wants to kind of A/B test things forever is the opposite of that, which is like, I'm just asking you to give me some variance and I'll figure out which one wins the popularity contest. And hey, I'm a bunch of Google designers here. I'm not knocking A/B testing entirely, but if you want to get somewhere innovative, you've got to dig a different hole. Can't dig in the same hole deeper. So how are you going to know where to dig, or how are you just going to allow yourself to get out of the hole you're in? And then I think it's important to remind yourself and your stakeholders, and I know from PG&E there's a lot of sort of assumption about what people need, who they are, what the solution is, what the KPIs are, what the OKRs are, and all of that is important too. And yet, and I learned this when I was at Frog, Hartmut Essinger would say, the only thing I care about is that when this thing is made, people love it. And he was serious about that. And I really took that to heart. It got me out of my, like, I did my part. I don't know what happened. Right? Because in the end of the day, if you really care about those people and you really care about your stakeholders and you really care about your team and you really care about yourself, you want that win in the market. And that's a good lever to use with stakeholders. Anytime somebody sort of says like, yeah, but that's not right, I'm not sure I'm asking you if it's right. I think I'm going to ask users if it's right. Like, thank you for your opinion, but we're going after success in the market, right? So let's set our OKRs on that, not on executive sign-off or such and so. I once worked at an organization where when I got there, the COO was signing off on visual design. They wanted to transfer that process to me. Thanks. Oh, and they wanted me to sign off on requirements documents. And I was like, what exactly does that mean? If I sign off on that requirements document and that thing fails in the market, what did my signature mean? Jack shit. Doesn't mean anything. So remind your stakeholders that we care about the humans in this process. We care about their opinions. And it can be a good cudgel to use if you want to punch up a little bit to remind people of what they should care about as well. Another thing I hear a lot from designers is like, I can't quite get a seat at the table. I'm having trouble getting in front of the right people. They don't listen to me. They don't let me talk to users, all of that. And I'm sure that's true. In my experience, no one ever asks you to sit at the table. You could try to force yourself to the table. You could also decide maybe the table's not where you want to be. Maybe what you want to be doing, again, back to the like, we love our users, is like, hey, you guys have your table conversation, but now let's go talk about what humans want. Let's go talk about what our users want and paint that way. So I don't know how many times you guys have been in meetings with people who are stuck on the bullet points and the spreadsheets. They can't, I had a boss that once said, can't drive a parked car, can't steer a parked car. We got to get the car out of park. So I think designers are really uniquely positioned to do this, right? Nobody, either there's a million ideas or no ideas, doesn't matter. Both lead to the paralysis. It's good things for designers to be able to make artifacts to say, did you mean like this? And it's fine if they start going like, absolutely not, that is not at all what I meant. Great, but now we're talking about a thing as opposed to some abstraction. was actually a little while ago at 3M. They ran a study. They looked at all the business plans over the last 5 years or something. They decided to ban bullet points. And I'm sure this was a hot second, but they basically looked at all these business plans and they were like, you know what the bullet points give us? They say we're gonna do things cheaper, better, and faster. While true, not helpful. So how are we gonna get people out of that model, lead them with our artifacts, lead them with our research, lead them with the skills that we bring that are maybe a little lacking in some of our compatriots? Show them the way to the love. They know the way to the bottom line, maybe. Sometimes they don't even know that. So make things that get them kind of out of park. Get the car out. You can do it in a 180, but got to get the car out of park. Recently, I don't know, I was on Twitter, Dan Saffer and I were going back and forth on this idea that, I had this realization that one of the superpowers a lot of designers have is being able to think in a multi-state system in our heads. And I don't know if you recognize that that's a superpower, but how many times have you been trying to have a conversation about a design and you realize your stakeholders are utterly confused, right? And that's why they have process maps. That's why they need step-by-steps, because once they get past a few states, it's really challenging for them. So take pride in that, but also acknowledge those poor people, that you need to make this external, you externalize this for them. I'm looking at a coworker over there, we had, the things up on the wall. The reason we put things up on the wall, lest you forget, is to help those people manage multi-states so that they don't have to do it in their heads. And I think a lot of times when I see designers struggling, it's because they're talking past someone who is just not wired the same way. So the empathy we have for our users doesn't stop there. We can have empathy for those stakeholders that we work with as well. Okay, so then that's dealing with stakeholders. The next kind of level in is my team. When I think about design being human, there's the very real human connections in a team. And I'm gonna assume we all work in kind of similar models where it's all about the people, right? Agile itself will get you wherever faster. It doesn't tell you whether you're building the right thing. You maybe learn through some testing that it could be better or worse, but your team and the relationship you have there is invaluable. And as I've gotten in these bigger organizations, I realize actually how important that is. I think the temptation at scale is to put it in a box, to make it replicable, to make it a process. At PG&E, we love a lot of process. That's important too, but it's the people who perform that process that are actually making that magic happen. So I'm a big fan of pair design. Wrote a thing about it with Chris Nossa, who's definitely a big proponent. At Frog, we practice pair design, and at Cooper, we practice pair design. And it's hard to pull off. By pair design, what I mean are two different kinds of people who work really on a problem together in a very dedicated way. I don't mean the senior designer and the junior designer. It's a form of pairing. But it's really what happens when you have a visual designer and an interaction designer, or a researcher and a prototyper, a product manager and a designer, a developer and a designer. Because the magic thing that happens is two people with really different points of view, authentically engaging with one another, get to radically different solutions. And I don't know about your experience, but I can often come into something like, I am so right. I am so right. And I work with a guy, Dustin. I've worked with him actually at a couple of places, and he is kind of my opposite. It's one of the reasons I love to work with him. And he will challenge me. He'll challenge me. He'll say, well, I don't think that that's true. I think this is right. And I think that's absolutely not right. Together, we get to a much better place, and that we're actually able to have that conversation, and it's not no order taking, no order giving. It's not even collaboration. It's truly, honestly, two different perspectives. So, it's a tough thing to pull off. It's something you can do on your own, though, right? You can seek out someone to work with you. You can seek out someone who's different than you. And I encourage you to do that and get your work in front of them. And do that for each other, right? How can we set up a democratized critique system where we can help each other out, providing those points of view? The other thing I realize about teams is that teams can tend to be driven into the ground. I don't know how many of you've kind of been in that phase of the project where you're delivering tactical work over and over and over again, and you kind of lose your steam. You probably lose some creativity. So I'm always trying to give people both something that is strategic and big picture as well as something tactical. Because also, if you've done big strategic projects, at some point you're like, I don't even know what end is up. I'm gonna make a PowerPoint. I don't know where this is going. This might be a great idea that no one will ever see. So if you can help yourself be bimodal and help yourself think about, when I'm way down in the weeds, what should I be thinking about that's bigger picture? And help your team when there's bigger picture stuff, what can we actually deliver? And help that conversation. It'll help your team health and it'll help probably your mental health. I also think that space, we just moved at PG&E to a shiny new floor. It's all open and it's great. And we have lots of little spaces to break out in. Before we were in like a boiler room, all 70 people in one giant room. I didn't have a desk for the first 6 months, literally. But it was kind of cool to just get in there and have it be a messy space. It's also nice to now have a clean space, so it's nice to go make a mess somewhere else, so you can come back to a cleaner space when you need to like do your work, because sometimes to actually get your work done with a bunch of clutter is challenging. So how can you let your team have that literal and metaphorical space to go make messes? And I'm really intentional about messes. This is kind of back to the nobody hired us to just follow A to B to C, right? They wanted us to come up with creative, new, innovative, breakthrough, disruptive, whatever ideas. And some of that involves thrashing around in the woods for a little while, getting lost, doing it wrong, figuring that out, and having enough space to do that. I don't know how many of you have tried to ideate with someone that is just ready to get to the answer. And the first two things that are wrong, you're just like, well, forget it. We're never gonna get there now because everything is wrong. So give yourself some of that white space. And if you manage designers, help them get white space. Not just designers, honestly. And then the last thing is about the diversity of a team. This is kind of back to that pair design thing. Diversity isn't for its own sake. It's because diversity creates better ideas. That's why we're going after this. I was just at an event recently talking to the CFO of HP, and she said, it is time for us to start making the dollars and cents argument for diversity and inclusion. It actually has a bottom line effect, and we need to be talking about that and not the do-gooderism. I don't know, I was in design consulting. We charge hella money for crazy breakthrough ideas. So how do we bring that mentality into the workplace, and maybe a place that isn't about consulting, to remind ourselves that that's why we want different kinds of people, because that's where the good ideas come from. And then, just to talk a little bit about me, and I don't mean me, but I mean us as designers. So this is my quote on the wall with all these beautiful posters. I feel very flattered. I think it occurred to me about 5 years ago that the expectation in a lot of people's minds about digital design is that each one of us, given the right same inputs, will end up at the same place. And that is absolutely not true. Just in the same way if we were making pottery, the way someone does something is unique to them. And as a person who managed designers, that used to drive me nuts. I'd be like, no, but I need you to get here. How did you get there? And not realize that it's the same thing. It's the same market love. It's just that person's fingerprints. And so for yourselves, it's to validate that, you have your own style. And that style might be, a temporary style in terms of this is how I wireframe or this is how I prototype. But also your ideas have those fingerprints. And probably it's a lot of people's fingerprints. There's a temptation to want to be the person who came up with the idea. Have any of you ever come up with the idea? No, there's not a single hand raised. All I'm doing is facilitating the best ideas and letting everyone get those fingerprints all over everything, and to celebrate that as opposed to be like, yeah, well, that's Joe and he probably could have done it better, but, right? No, that's what Joe did. Good job, Joe. High five. So yeah, this is Greg Petroff about paranoid designers. And I've definitely heard this too. I'm being excluded. There's the prima donna stereotype. Oh, my way or the highway. And there's the pride in our craft. And I've crossed out designers are paranoid prima donnas who are proud to put up a can be. Because those things can be used. Not everyone is or wants to inhabit the prima donna persona. It's a pretty good tool, though. I have definitely used it in situations where somebody is trying to get me to do something, and that moment in time, I can sort of just be like, I'm gonna have to think about that. I'm gonna need a little space. I'm the person you hired. I'm the person whose fingerprints you wanted on this. You're gonna have to respect my authority a little bit. You might not be that person. You might be like, no, I'm a more humble person. That is totally fine too. You may or may not be paranoid. If you are paranoid and you are thinking that they're always out to get you, there's that assume best intent, but use that, that's a signal to you. There's a problem going on, right? So instead of getting paranoid and being a victim about it, hey, put your problem solving skills on that. If you don't feel included, how could you change that conversation? Who do you need to get in front of? Don't wait for someone to come to you. Say, hey, I need to talk to you. You're not listening to me. You're not hearing me. And then, being proud of our craft. Again, I think people in digital design and in the design field, I don't know, especially in tech, the coders and the product managers have big clout. And designers can sometimes feel like, well, they're just designers. Nonsense. Like, again, this is a real craft. It's a craft that's been developing for a long time. I know that you are all good at it. Demonstrate that and be proud of the work that you do and make sure others know that you are, that you're not just a cog in a machine. You're not just someone who can make some pixels. You're a problem solver, you're a creative thinker, and you've led them on a new path. And you've got to deliver. Don't get me wrong, you can't just pontificate about this, but if you can show them, we were just doing a project where it's a kind of pedestrian design problem, but that moment still happened where we came up with two things they'd never thought of before, and that was their moment of oh, yeah, maybe you really know what you're talking about. Okay. So have some pride. And then, I don't know about you guys, it's hard as a creative person in an analytical world, right? There's deadlines and all this forced stuff. I love my relationship with the Muse. She has been very good to me. She is not consistent. I have learned to not force her. I try to be open to when I'm creative, and when I'm not quite feeling it, that's a good time to go crit your own work. That's a good time to go get with someone else and crit their work. That's a good time to redline stuff. That's a good time to document stuff. Good ways to think about being bimodal. And have this conversation with those around you, right? Be able to express, I think today is a day where I'm gonna need a little space. I'm not feeling, you can bring up the word muse or not. You can use your own language there. Some people might be weirded out by that. But it's a thing, right? There is this phenomena. We have a Greek myth about it for a reason. Acknowledge that we are not machines who are gonna be on all the time. We are creative people. And frankly, developers are too, and I think they have the same issue. And sometimes what you might perceive in other designers or other team members is running up against that. Somebody's asking you for the good juice and you're just not there. So give yourself a little space. I am a big snowboarder. What I learned from snowboarding is, especially when it's high stakes, I can't be distracted. I have to be really focused. I have to be able to bend my knees and take a deep breath. And that same thing happens in the business world. It just, if you think about all of the amazing people, even the Zuckerbergs and the Bezos and all those people, somewhere in their success, in their career success, was good luck. We love to think it's all meritocracy and all of the best people are at the top. I think every one of us also knows that's utter bullshit. Everybody has had I've had a million lucky breakthroughs. I would not be here today if I weren't. But how are you gonna be open to the luck when it comes? Because like the Muse, it's gonna come on its own timeline. You can't force it. So how are you okay enough at work? How are you not grinding away so that when it knocked on the door, you're like, I'm too busy. I'm triple booked right now. And part of that, again, is being able to have conversations with your manager, or again, if you are a manager, how are you supporting your team in that way? How are you letting them have their knees bent, taking deep breaths, and feeling confident, right? So if you catch yourself or others of your team members feeling stressed out, let's check in on each other. Let's ask about what's going on. Hey, it's personal. We don't need to get into the personal. But if it's something that we can help each other out with, it benefits us all. Because again, this is not A to B to C to Z. There's a moment in there in creativity where magic happens. And you can't, we all know this experience. I don't really know where that idea came from. It's Archimedes in his bath, bolt from the blue. Oh, that's that idea finally. You've got to be able to pay attention to it. I don't know, some of you might have had the experience I have from consulting where I had the best idea, we delivered it, it never went anywhere, and someone called me 6 years later. I was like, I found this printed, that's how long ago this was, printed deliverable with your business card in the back, and I looked you up on the internet, and I want to tell you, we really want to do this idea. I was like, wow, you're 6 years late. But hey, let me see if I can help you out, because maybe it is the right idea. Like, how do we surf the wave as it happens? But just to kind of rewind and recap here, there's the users, and yeah, we're user-centered designers. The thing we want to remember is that, empathy is a big loaded word, but we are doing things for and with people because we care about them, ultimately, more than anything else, more than the paycheck. When we're talking about stakeholders, something to think about, stakeholders at their core, your relationship with them, can be about helping them experience design. So, again, I've just started at PG&E, and I'm talking to a bunch of people who are like, design is CAD of substations. I don't know what you're talking about. And I've given the spiel and I've given the talk, but the thing that works beyond the training is letting them experience it. It's that workshop where you took them through the journey mapping, or building personas, or prototyping. Like, that's where that breakthrough comes through. There's no dancing about architecture here. Help them experience it. And that might take a little bit of going back to that prima donna thing of hey, just trust me. Come on this ride with me. I promise you it will be fun. Try that out. Make sure that they have fun in that experience as experienced designers. But that'll help you out. At scale, I think this means focusing those people who are not designers on the so that I can part of the user story. Everybody loves the as an X, I need Y part of the user story. So that I can what? Right? That's how you can help your stakeholders. Get them really laser focused on what's the business benefit? What are we enabling? I'll handle the solution there, and the tech team will handle the solution there. No one else can really, and this is where you build them up. We're relying on you, Mr. Business Person, Ms. Business Person, to know the business value and help them focus on that. At a team level, I think my key takeaways are about that diversity of opinion, diversity of approaches, diversity of skills, with enough space and kind of air cover. So again, as somebody who leads teams of people, it's important for me to use my clout to buy them time. I know that my bosses do a great job of big-upping me at work, and I have to do that for other people. We can do that for each other so that there's some air cover there, so that it's not like you're not out there on the ledge, and if you made one mistake, you're kind of dead. Nobody should be in that situation. Just give each other and give your reports, if you're a manager, that airspace. At scale, and again, I kind of go back to the I wish we could just put it in a box. I don't think you can. I think that what teams at scale means is that they're actual authentic connections between people. Now, we can facilitate them. We can do stuff like this that allows you all to come together as human beings and meet each other and network and whatnot. But there's no process, there's no tool that's going to make the team stick together. So, be good at that. I really I see a lot of people in my office, it's the eating lunch, it's the going for runs. I'm not that person, but I'll eat lunch with you. I'm not going to run with you. But that's cool. They can run together, right? And so how are you participating in that larger community? And this is, again, a great example of that. And there's probably at different levels that can happen. And then kind of at the personal core, that's you leaving your fingerprints all over everything. And then at scale, you're helping other people. And you're not being the person that feels like I have to be recognized as the, creative fairy dust magic maker. There's a lot of debate in user-centered design about ego-driven design versus user-centered design. You can have an ego in user-centered design. That's the fingerprints part. Yes, you have an opinion, you have experience, you have a gut, you have intuition. All of that is priceless. Direct it toward users, fantastic. And help other people understand that. And again, kind of your leaders, your stakeholders can understand that too, that there's many people's fingerprints on this. And I see this among product owners or stakeholders where they need to be seen as the one with having the idea. And you can take this opportunity to make sure we're all synthesizing everyone's idea. If it was their idea, how come it didn't work last time you tried it? Because they probably did. So I'm gonna do some Q&A, right? This is my daughter's drawing. She wanted to make sure you all knew that. But thank you so much. I loved any questions you guys have.
Yes, thank you. have mics here, so take some questions from the audience here.
I feel you on the speaking to the engineers part. I grew up with engineers. My dad's a ME and my grandfather was a CE, and so when I speak about design, they kind of glaze over a little bit. So when you're working with your compatriots at work, have you sat down with them and tried to understand them from the substations that they speak about? Have you tried to learn about, PG&E and what they do, and from the engineering side to actually speak to them better?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the reason I took the job. So I'm not working on consumer stuff so much. I'm working on tools for our workforce. And so I love the ride-alongs. I mean, to a man, and they've been mostly men, you ask them about their favorite part of the job, and they're like, I like being alone in my truck. They're all crystal clear on that benefit, right? And it's that autonomy. They get to make judgments and like really trying to understand. I can't quite understand substation engineering, but I can understand the mentality of somebody who's working a super high risk situation. Like people are injured and killed working with electricity and gas, right? So again, back to that empathy of like, I'm absolutely trying to understand them. I'm not necessarily trying to get them to understand me in the same way. Like back to that, like I want them to experience a great thing. If at the end of the day, they still don't know what design is, I don't care. That's fine. I want them to love the thing I made. Literally, that is my bottom line. And maybe if they learn a little something about design, that's cool. I know I was with one guy, he said, well, my product design, that's interesting. And he asked him, look at my coworker, well, what's she do? I said, she's a scrum master. He just started laughing. He's like, what is that? I've never even heard those words put together before. Is that rugby? And part of empathizing with the users is like, that's cool, dude. You don't need to understand Scrum Mastering. Sorry, Scrum Master Academy diva. But
so my question is that I don't know if you have experienced that you have to work with people that already have a tension in the relationship, and how do you try to repair so that you can move on and do good works?
yes, the therapy situation. No, I don't know if you're talking about like you and that person have a bad relationship, or they just in general have been burned by design, or?
Not necessarily between you and the other audience, but in the whole group there is some tension.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reality of a team, right? What are the storming, norming, forming, reforming? All blows up in the end and you bring it back together. It's a part of life, right? And so I think part of what it is about being a human-centered designer, and kind of what I'm emphasizing here, is that we should have tolerance for that humanity and be okay with that. I know you guys are gonna be shocked. I get told that I'm too aggressive and bossy all the time. It's fine. I am hella bossy. But part of it is like, that's who I am. I'm 45 years old. I've tried. Can't be any less bossy. So bring your authentic self to that and be focused on the goal of pleasing your users and winning their hearts and minds, and see if you can work through all of that stuff. See if you can be the bigger person. Again, we have great skills to break through the issues. We can get people to be kind of relentlessly positive. And I've even worked with I've never worked with a super negative goth designer. I'm sure they exist. But even the kind of most cynical, all black wearing designers I know still are problem solvers at their core. And so they're not gonna walk up to that tension and just tolerate it. They're driven. We're all driven to address that problem. So, be patient, take some space, do stuff that is not hitting that problem on the head all the time. Let's go out to lunch, let's go for a run, let's do whatever that is. And I would be very vocal about the fact that this debate, this tension, totally fine. In fact, if it weren't there, I might be asking, why? Why is that? Why are we all getting along? Are we getting the best ideas? Back to pair design, why do I even need to be here? So I get the question sometimes, my product owner is drawing wireframes for me. Are they any good? Because if they're a good designer, you could be I'm gonna go over here. You could totally solve that. You got this thing. Go for it. Again, you don't have to solve every problem. So be that bigger person is my advice, for what it's worth.
Thank you so much. Speaking to the theme of design as human, I was hoping you could speak to ethics a little bit, and maybe back to your time as a consultant. When does human-centered design offer us a chance to to sort of touch ethics, because while we are focused on the user, maybe even if we're providing something for them that's exactly what they want, is that really better for them as people? And then maybe speaking to your experience at PGE, when do we have to think about something like the environment, for example, and when does that come?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very live conversation right now. In fact, I think when we met, I was kind of talking about ethics and AI, right? That's a big point for us as designers. I think the thing, again, I would go back to being user-centered. Now, somebody says, I want an easier way to do X. You know, we know to go past that. What's the Henry Ford quote? If you asked them, they'd just say they wanted a faster horse. So listen past that. What are you actually missing in your life, and is this going to fill the void? I know if I start doing too much online shopping, I'm like, maybe there's something going on, trying to fill that hole, right? So how do we externalize for other people and for our users that? There are also like pretty tactical things that you could do in terms of ethics, like recently there was some science had found the scientific answer to beauty, the absolute perfect nostril size for a beauty. It was on the Today Show. You want to know who owns the perfect nose? Kate Middleton. Yes. She's got it all. There's two white newscasters having this banter, and there's two African-American newscasters on either side of them who are just like, nostril size? Seriously? Like, did nobody else think about the funnel going into this study and whether it was broad enough? So I think there are things we can do to poke on, like our algorithm building. We can poke on our automation building. When I was working on the surgical robot, I would see something in a surgery and I would think, I'll design an answer to that, and I'd come back and the developers would say, oh, we're just gonna automate that. Does the doctor want that automated? Can you automate it? What if you automate it badly? Like, at some point we still need to we are an interface between the algorithm and the human. And then in terms of the, PG and the environment, the organization at large is very focused on that. We have a huge target. I'm like looking for somebody that's 90% of renewables by 2050, 50% I forget. Got to get that speaking point down. But our leadership sets these, and actually the people of California have set targets for us. And that's a great way to do that too, which is again to say we're all focused on this end goal, right? Let's measure ourselves on that end goal, not on some random step somebody decided to take on a Tuesday because they thought it was a good idea.
If I may push back just a little bit, I'm really interested though in when they come in conflict with each other. So in the case of like consulting, or let's say the example of shopping, there's this emotional need that's being filled by shopping. Likely, the client on designing the interface for that shopping is not really concerned with their emotional needs, and in fact, it benefits them to capitalize on that. So when is the opportunity to like innovate a little bit on the way we apply ethics, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, no technology is utterly benign. But we don't have to be Oppenheimers, right? Oppenheimer invented the bomb, for those of you who don't know that reference. So I think there's some gray area there. Like, if you've gone to work for an e-retailer, you went to work for an e-retailer. Like, that's the business you got into. If you don't think that's a healthy business, probably don't work there. But if you're actually in a situation where you're being asked, like, what was the latest Uber screw up? Whatever it was. Somebody on Twitter was like, at what point do we start asking about the engineers who say yes to that stuff, right? So there is the, like, I'm being asked to do something that I don't agree with, and you can decide what stand you want to take there all the way up to, and I'm out. But I don't know that you also have to like walk into e-commerce and try to say, I'm going to make e-commerce not addictive for people who are having a down day. Because I don't know that you can solve that from that position. You might want to make an app that deletes those apps from my phone when they detect my pattern. Whatever, I'm like winging it here. But
critical design.
Yeah, to interrupt that. So I think there's not a clean, in my mind, there's not a clean break there. Humans.
All right. If anyone else has a question? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank all of you. It's so lovely to be here.